We're here to talk about professional profiles, talk about what an administrative assistant dean does, how they rose this position, and all the benefits of being an assistant dean on campus. So let me take a few moments to introduce our panelists today. Or actually, they're going to introduce themselves. Sheila, why don't we start with you? Sheila Davis, the assistant dean for the School of Nursing.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here and glad you were able to make it as well. I'm Sheila Davis. I'm in the School of Nursing as the Assistant Dean of Administration.
And Reem Hanna-Harwell.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces and names. And for those of you that I haven't met, I look forward to meeting you one day. My name is Reem Hanna-Harwell. I'm Assistant Dean of Humanities in the College of Letters and Science.
And our third, but certainly not last panelist, Kathleen Micham.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Kathleen, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Kathleen Micham, although Micham is fine if you prefer. I'm not difficult about that. I'm Assistant Dean of Physical Sciences in the College of Letters and Science, so I work about 2 doors over from Reem. And I'm really happy to see everyone on the call, some whom I've met before and some I haven't met, and some I haven't seen in many years, so it's really nice to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you for each of our panelists for booking some time for us. I want to start out, I'll start with Kathleen because we just ended with her. Can you tell us how you rose to your current position and your career history?
Sure, absolutely. I had a lot of different sort of career paths before I got to UCLA. I started at UCLA relatively late in my career. So I had 10 years where I lived and worked in Europe, which was wonderful and was a great chapter of my life. So started at UCLA relatively late and was in summer sessions for several years, and then moved from summer sessions to the CAO position in Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences. And then from there moved to that same position in chemistry and biochemistry. And chemistry, of course, is very similar to EPSS, just much bigger. And then from chemistry moved to the assistant dean job. So I sort of came up through the manager track, if you will. That's how I got to my position. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah. So Reem, why don't you share with us your history?
I will first say there is no typical path. Kathleen, who just spoke, I'll share with you, she's too modest. She has a PhD in French literature. I have a master's in business. She should be Assistant Dean of Humanities, right? I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's all to say all paths lead to Rome. I started out working in the private sector. I was, at places like Bloomberg Financial Markets, Price Waterhouse. I hated it. So when I joined university life, it felt like coming home. I love it. My path was a bit atypical in the sense that I think people rise up usually through the CAO route, and that really makes the most sense. I was in our college budget office for 10 years, so I was very much of a budget person before shifting over. But, so I have to go to folks like Kathleen to ask about how things like purchasing work and things that you don't do in a budget office, but you do as a CAO. So, but I'm sure Sheila can share yet another way to become an assistant dean.
Definitely. I said that was going to be one of the interesting pieces of this is, hearing everybody's journey, because it's definitely not a standard. I kind of say that I'm UC grown. I started at UC San Diego. I was an undergrad and I worked in student affairs with early outreach. And when I graduated from there, my first job was at UC Santa Barbara, and I worked at missions and relations with schools doing recruitment throughout the state. So both of those kind of gave me the student affairs piece. And then when I came to UCLA, I was in what used to be known as campus payroll. and learned everything about payroll, and specifically moving into working what we learn on South Campus as Med Plan, which is really different from our regular payroll. And I was there for like 9 years and then left and went to external affairs as a personnel rep. So doing onboarding, and then received a call from a director in what used to be ISOP, now it's International Institute, said, "Hey, can you come and manage this unit for me?" And I was like, "Oh God, I don't know how to do that." And they're like, "Oh, you'll learn." And so jumped in there and was an MSO for 3 years there in African Studies, was a MSO in Asian American Studies for 3 years. That's where Reem and our paths crossed when she was in finance. As she said, we worked really closely then. Then I moved to South Campus in CIML, it used to be called MPI when I was there, and was doing Med Plan for CIML for a while, a quick minute actually. And then I received a call from the CFO that was at Graduate School of Education and said, "Hey, we have this unique position. I want to talk to you about it." And I didn't know him from Adam, but he had heard about me, and there was a variety of things that he wanted this position to kind of oversee. And so I moved to Graduate School of Education. I was there for about 6 years. And from there, a colleague of mine, I'm not sure if she's on this call, called me and she's like, "I've seen the perfect job for you." And I was like, "What's that?" And she's like, "HR director for neurology." And I was like, "Oh God, no, I can't do that," you know? And she bugged me and bugged me, and I applied and interviewed for the job and got the job, and was there for about 3 or 4 years. And School of Nursing needed help, and I was asked to do dual employment. And my boss at the time, Stephanie Fisher, said, "If you want to, help them out, it's up to you." So I said, "Okay." And she's like, "Don't go over there accepting any positions." And I was like, "No, no, no, I'm happy. I'm happy." And I did the dual employment for about a year. And my boss at the time said, "Stephanie, I think the dean really, likes working with you, and it seems like it would be a good opportunity." And that's how I ended up at School of Nursing. I started out as the CAO, and that position evolved to an assistant dean, which usually professional schools have representing them. So my journey has a lot more pieces in the puzzle than Reem and Kathleen, but we ended up in the same type of positions.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. I find it interesting that you all have different backgrounds and different roads, but you ended up in similar places.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about assistant deans. What actually is an assistant dean? What do you do on a regular basis? Sheila, why don't we start with you?
I think that in some respects, our jobs may be similar, and in some respects, they can be different. Some of our focuses are on administration. Some of our focuses are on, the financial piece, and some are a blend of both. My position, I tend to work across the board. So I work really closely with our CFO and finance manager. We have budget meetings with the dean that I attend. But I'm also responsible for the day-to-day operations of the schools. So that can be facilities. It could be any type of problem, a student issue, a faculty issue, a staff issue, whether that falls up under HR. And in my position, I also wear the hat of being the HR director for the school. So you can find the fact that we're a smaller School of Nursing, that I may cover more than other assistant deans that may be in a larger school that have more hands on deck. that they work with, but my daily could be anything, really. Sometimes it's, people don't know where to go, so they start with you. So
It's funny. I figured it ends up with you one way or another.
it can start and end with me.
So what do you think, Reem? What do you want to add to that?
It's really, the question really is, what don't you do as an assistant dean? I think it's also, the same applies to a CAO in many ways. So yeah, Sheila really covered a lot of the bases there in terms of budget. You're helping with faculty recruitment, faculty retention, space, staffing. I think it comes down daily really to a lot of problem solving, right? And it's just from one thing to the other. I do know that on the rare day where I can just sit and stare at a spreadsheet or key things into a database, I am so happy. And it's so rare. So I do sometimes miss having just that quiet mechanical type of work, because so much of the day is people oriented, which I love people, but it also takes energy, right? And so I'm sure Kathleen can absolutely relate to everything I just said. So
well, everything you both said, right? And the fact that every day, as you said, Mark, is different. And the fact also that my job, I don't know if Sheila and Reem would agree with this, but it's different even than it was 5 years ago, what the components of it, some things have gotten more important. But one thing I just add to your list, both of which I agree, and by the way, Sheila, just to reassure you, we're not much better staffed in the college than you are in the School of Nursing, right? So we're a little bit, cover a lot of different areas, although we have support, and to return Reem's compliment to her, we have a lot of support from Reem in the college for budgeting issues, right? Although we're responsible for our budgets, Reem provides a lot of support there, and we do have support from an HR director and an AP director, but all of these things are parts of our job. I just add one thing to your list is the support for the dean. I think, that's a part of my job, is to provide practical support, if you will, to my dean, and to try and help him kind of execute his vision, because he has a lot of great ideas and he has a vision and where he wants the division to go. And I consider myself as the person responsible for telling him how to get there, right? This is what we need to do. These are the people we need to talk to. These are the forms we need to fill out. This is how much money we're going to need, so that's a big part of my job too. And I assume that's true for Sheila and Reem as well, is being truly the assistant to the dean,
So let's get into that. Your boss is the dean. The dean is very important. He or she is going to, probably have a million thoughts and requests on a daily basis or a regular basis. Tell us about your interactions with the Dean Murphy Hall and how that impacts your job. Because I'm sure, since y'all have different deans, it really creates variability in your duties.
Right. So, Mark, should I go first? I can go first if you want.
Go for it.
Having just mentioned my dean. So my dean is Miguel Garcia Garibay, who's a professor of chemistry. And, one thing is the kind of how do we actually work together? The crux of our working relationship is a 1-hour meeting on Thursday, right, where we really hammer out a lot of issues in a very short period of time, right? And and emails as well. I'm very lucky in that Miguel, as we call him, really relies on the people around him. So he relies on his assistant dean, he relies on his executive assistant, he relies on his associate deans. And so, and I like that a lot, because he'll give people projects and he'll say, go do it. Right. And we only need to report back, right, if there are problems or we encounter obstacles. But my interaction with my dean is extremely positive and I would say extremely efficient as well. So one interesting thing about Miguel too is he does maintain a research program. So in addition to his work as a dean, he has a fairly significant, presence in the labs, right? So that's part of his time commitment as well. So.
How about you, Reem?
So yes, very similar to Kathleen. I would say, I've worked with different deans. My current dean, sadly for me, steps down in a week. So November 1st, David Schaberg and I have been working together for 11 years. He is just the most brilliant human. And I will say his style and mine have really gelled very well because we both sort of we value sort of our independence and our ability to just work independently. And there are times like Kathleen, we have our weekly check-in, but during that week, sometimes I'm sure Sheila, you can relate too, so much might happen. And we might not have time to actually check in with each other, but we trust each other. So even, by the time we finally get to talk about this crisis or that catastrophe or even joyous things, right? It's never like, well, you shouldn't have done that, or why did you say that? So knowing that we have that relationship has been really, really helpful to me. And I try to replicate that when I work with people, I'm sure it's similar for chairs and CAOs as well, that you all have this experience. The volume has just become so overwhelming that you can't possibly check every little thing with everyone all the time. And so, I do value that ability to delegate and not to micromanage. And I feel strongly that when employees have the sense that they're trusted, that their supervisor sees in them a skill that they know that they're superb at and can be left alone to do it, you have the happiest people that way, and they're the much more likely to, contribute. So I've been very lucky that way. Sheila, I'm curious what you have to share.
Yes, I've worked for two deans, Linda Sarna, which I worked for 6 years, and had a wonderful working relationship. She was not just my boss, but she was also a mentor. And I learned a lot from her. Coming into this position, I felt like, I had a really good network across campus, and she appreciated that. And she had an extensive, great network. She had been part of the Academic Senate. She is the reason why we have a tobacco-free campus. So she retired a year ago and definitely is still active, with the university, and has left a mark on UCLA as well as the School of Nursing. I've had a new dean that I've worked with for a little bit over a year, Lynn Zahn, and she's new to UCLA. And as with anyone who comes to UCLA, there's a learning curve, and she has been a dean, I think at least 10 years prior to coming to UCLA, but it's just different, so it's trying to learn, how things work, why they're this way, how to get things done. She definitely has great vision for the School of Nursing. And in working with her, my job is to help her to make those visions come true. And how does that happen, in UCLA's, red tape, layers of bureaucracy. And I was actually participating on the Busting Bureaucracy. And so she would always say, this is something that you could take to Busting Bureaucracy. How do we get this, simplified? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. But we have one-on-one meetings for an hour every week as well. But it's not necessarily, as Kathleen and Reem said, not necessarily the only time that we talk. And sometimes, that can be early in the morning. She can call you at 5 or 6 in the morning, especially if she's traveling that day, or if it's something that has kind of come unraveled after 5. We've been, on the phone at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, whether I'm calling her or she's calling me. So definitely a relationship that is necessary, and I feel comfortable, going to the dean with whatever, because I think in our jobs it's part of the lay of the land, especially if there's a crisis that is bubbling up. We have to work together with our deans and strategize on what the next steps are going to be.
Well, Sheila, you have a relatively new dean, and Reem, you're getting a new dean. How do you guys manage up? I mean, I imagine a new dean comes in, they've never been a dean here. They don't know what it's like. You guys want to comment on that?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I think that what a new dean brings with them, especially if there's someone from outside of UCLA, is what their experience has been where they came from, and what the workflow was where they came from. And that doesn't necessarily fit into UCLA, and sometimes that can be frustrating. For me, someone who has just grown up in UC, it's all I know. So, it's like a language, if that's the language that you know it, and you don't question it, you know how to get things done. It may not be a two-step process, but the steps that it takes to get where you want to be. When you have someone who's coming from the outside, you definitely find yourself, it's like, even if you were training someone, you want them to know why you're doing what you're doing. Because if they don't have an understanding of why it's being done, then the next time you come to something, the same thing again, they're not going to understand why. So if they have an understanding why, then it becomes easier. The workflow becomes easier. And they know, this has to be signed off by this office or this person, or these are the steps, and it becomes familiar. I can see the transition with my dean just from when she started till now. I mean, she knows like the academic personnel process. She knows for each level of a faculty member, whether it has to go to our committee within the school, if it has to go to CAP, or where the approvals are coming from. So she has definitely embraced, many of these processes, because she knows that this is how we get things done. But then there are times where she has pushed back too. And I think central offices they realize who she is. And she's like, okay, why can't we do that? Where's the policy? So she will question, she will challenge. And I think that that's part of the learning process for everybody, because sometimes we're here so long and we do things and we're like, then you'll sit back and say, okay, why are we doing that? Wait a minute, I can't find a policy on that, And so it's just something that we've always done. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it has to be done. And so it's growth on both sides.
I guess I'll add to that's exactly right, how Sheila described it. I think part of the challenge with a new dean, unless they've been a dean or have been in a similar position before, is that they're having to really scale up. Meaning, let's just say if they were previously a chair or running a research lab, they could be much more in control of everything that has their name on it. And that goes out the window as dean, right? You just don't have the time, and you have to eventually trust the people that you're working with, that so there are many things I review for my dean and just say, yes, it's fine for David's signature to go on this, right? And he doesn't have to look at every one of those things, but I think that takes some time. And how I cope with a new dean, I haven't had to do that for 11 years, so I don't know yet. But I generally try to cope with everything by injecting a bit of humor, because I think it allows us to survive our jobs in general if we can sit there and laugh sometimes and go, oh my goodness, I can't believe they said that, and and to, you know, just to lighten the mood. So that's sometimes my strategy. In Kathleen's case, she can share with you that she and her dean were previously the CAO and the chair, right? So I'll turn that over to Kathleen.
No, I've been very lucky because I've been working with the same boss for 8 years now, right? So I haven't experienced a change in dean, right? But I have, when I was a manager, and I think many on the call have, you know, experienced a change in chair, right? And you have to, you know, figure out what their email style is and what, you know, whether they're going to call you at 5 a.m. or 8 p.m. or both, or, you know, which one it's going to be. And so you do have to, as we are reporting, anybody who reports to an academic really has to adjust to that academic, right? And how they prefer to operate. So, but I would, the other thing that's interesting about our job, and Reem totally agree, sometimes I'm just, you know, amazed by how many documents I sign on Miguel's behalf with delegated authority, right? And if Miguel actually reviewed all of those, oh my goodness, right? I mean, it's you know, it's just impossible to imagine, right? So that's a part of our job too, right? Is to review you know, documents. And just for anyone who's interested in I don't know what your rule is, Sheila and Reem, but my rule is if it requires an academic judgment, it goes to Miguel. But if it doesn't require an academic judgment, then I've delegated authority to review the document. So anyway.
Yeah,
so.
that's exactly right. And it occurred to me to add one thing that I've noticed about myself, having worked with David for 11 years, is that when I'm drafting memos for him to send, I actually hear his voice in my head with his intonation, his style, his, you know, his way of choosing words. So I'm sure, Sheila, you have similar experiences there. So now I have to do that all over again, and we'll see how that goes.
Right, right. From one dean to the next, it can be different. I think that Dean Sarna and Dean John had different workflow styles, but so far I would agree with Kathleen and Reem. Anything that requires, you know, an academic review definitely would go to the dean. More of the you know, operations and administrative HR things I sign off on. But the financial things, my finance manager and my CFO sign off on. We may talk about those, you know, in our budget meetings, but the signature authority, since it's, you know, the finances and they're working with that on a day-to-day, our CFO and finance manager would sign off on whatever falls up under their review.
We all have very large portfolios. How do you manage those? How do you multitask and prioritize? Kathleen, I want to start with you.
I have to say, I don't, you know, I really rely, I mean, just on a very practical level, I rely on my email inbox as my kind of to-do list. I've tried to wean myself off of that with various tools and, you know, lists and gadgets and things, but I've been unsuccessful. So I do use my, and so sometimes if I know I need to do something like produce a report or that sort of thing, I send myself an email that says, you know, temp TA allocations or something like that, right? And then it's in my list of things to do. And so that's how I manage. And then, you know, there's, you know, I have a tendency to ask myself in the morning, what absolutely has to happen today? What piece of document do I have to get out? What email do I have to send? What person do I have to absolutely call today? And just make sure that that gets done, and then go from there. That's my own way of organizing myself. So,
Reem, do you have a better way? Sorry.
So, oh, sorry, my mouse went to the other screen. I couldn't find it. No, I don't have a better way. I'll just add very similarly to Kathleen. I do wake up every morning and think about, like, what are the top 1 or 2 things or 3 things that I really want to get done today. And, you know, sometimes that works, sometimes it does not work. I do keep sort of like a long to-do list of like all the things coming up, and just anything goes on it. And then I keep a daily to-do list. So I kind of try to keep them apart. You know, if it's call back this person, it goes on the daily list. But, you know, if it's more of a project that I need to get done, it goes on my longer term to-do list. I put everything down on the list because I'm just paranoid. Otherwise, I'll lose track of it. You know, the only other thing I'll add, and this is something that I learned, actually, it was advice my husband got long ago when he was writing a PhD, and I thought, oh, I can use this for work. It has to do with sort of A time, B time, C time, which is like when you're really in a, you're in an energetic, you're focused feeling, you slept well the night before. Do your A time work, which is work that requires a lot of analysis or writing or things that are complicated. And when you're just really tired, don't try to do your A work, do B work or C work, which might be organizing something or cleaning your inbox. I gave up on cleaning my inbox. That does not happen anymore. But anyway, that has actually really helped me, because to force yourself to do really complicated work when you're just really tired, not a good idea. So
for me, I do use my email a lot. I also, especially when I'm in meetings, I have my to-dos that I write down and I star them. And I have a book that I take my notes in. And so anything that has a star by it is an action item that I need to get done. And so I review those to make sure that I've completed them. And also in working with my staff, I tell them, don't wait on me, ping me. You know, it's never, I never get tired or like, or annoyed about somebody reminding me about something that, you know, we need to get done, especially if we're working on something together, that it's not something I'm doing independently. Because I tell them all the time, I'm in 5 million different directions. So I don't mind, you know, you coming back saying, we need to work on this or the deadline's coming up. I also do put reminders on my calendar to help me with keeping up with things. And I know that Kathleen and Reem said that, you know, first thing in the morning, they kind of try to prioritize. I think that I'm probably a little paranoid. So it's usually the night before. It's like, how is my day going to start tomorrow? What meetings do I have? To make sure that I have everything that I need that's, you know, prepared, so that in the morning when I'm getting up knowing what my first thing is that I'm going to start. And that's worked for me. So you have to figure out, you know, what your style is that's going to be your best at, you know, reminders and keeping track of what you need to do.
No, that's great, Sheila. And you mentioned that sometimes you'll take a call at 5 a.m., sometimes it'll be 9 p.m. What's your normal work week, and how do you avoid, you know, working 100 hours a week? Or do you work 100 hours a week?
I don't know about a normal work week is probably, before, you know, 8 o'clock and after 5. It's just the way things work. And I'm not one who likes surprises, you know, if they can be avoided, whether that's coming to me or whether that's going to the dean. So people, I have an open door policy. I always have. And so now that, you know, a lot of us are remote, that open door is on the phone. So people call or I call them, and not to disrespect, you know, like staff's time, you know, and their downtime, but they know that I don't mind the calls. When there's something that needs to get done, hey, I want to give you a heads up. My MSO is on here, Carl, and I know that we do that a lot. And it's like, hey, I want to let you know that this is coming down the pipeline, you know, and that works both ways. Either me telling my staff something, or they letting me know. I think that most of my staff is on hybrid schedules, so they're on certain days or certain weeks where they're on campus, and certain days that they're remote. And so depending on who's there and who's seeing certain things that need to get done or haven't been done, or whatever the case is, it takes all of us to work together in order to make sure that the school is running efficiently.
Anything the other two want to add to that?
In the basic question of how many hours, Mark? Or
Yeah,
the hours, yeah. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, right? No, I mean, in that it does have a tendency to spread out, certainly beyond the 40-hour week, right? And depending on what's on the schedule. And I agree with Sheila too, is I have tried to make sure it's half of Los Angeles has my cell phone number now, right? And I try and be as responsive as possible to people who who want to reach out early or late or whatever. But I'd like to echo what Reem said too. It's funny because I just, it's so clear to me. I'm a morning person, and it's so clear to me that I'm capable of so much in the morning, and then that by the evening that my ability to handle complex tasks decreases. But if I had to put a number on it, Mark, I'm guessing it's 50 hours a week, something like that, maybe tending towards 60 in some periods, right? So but then I may be slower than everybody else too. So maybe Reem can,
No.
yes.
Not at all.
So
no, yeah, I agree. I think, well, I mean, I guess what I can just add is, I have two sons. I'm sure others here have. I know Kathleen, Sheila, you can share perhaps. So it is tough, to balance your kids and your work. I strongly believe in protecting other people's time that I work with. And I know I can see Sheila and Kathleen nodding, right? Because I really feel like we need to put our families first. It is hard to do in this job at times, I will admit, but I do try. And I hope everyone here tries to do that as well. So I guess that's all I can say on that.
So one little trick I found, that helps me with that, because I find that maybe because I just really need to think about things, right? So sometimes I think about things on the weekend, and I'll want to send an email, and there's that wonderful gadget in Outlook that allows you to delay delivery, right? So you can put your thoughts down in an email on, during the weekend, but make sure that the staff member only receives them on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And I think that's a great trick. So yeah.
So thanks, Kathleen. A number of people are on this call because they want to be you when they grow up. We've had some questions in the chat. What skills are important to this role? Do you need an advanced degree? What sort of advice would you have for people who aspire to be assistant deans? Why don't we start with Reem?
Okay. I guess my observation, it is a bit of a strange job, and I'll tell you why. Typically you work more in a hierarchy, right? You have people reporting to you, you report to someone, and there's some clarity. I will say at UCLA that kind of fades a little, because we're more like a nation state here. We're our own little country, right? We have our own hospital, our own library, our own, you can pretty much do anything within UCLA as a little nation state. So I think people as such, the hierarchy becomes a bit less important. But I'm rambling. What I mean to say, as an assistant dean, you actually don't have a lot of direct reporting lines, right? There aren't that many people that you're supervising directly. So it requires a lot more of diplomacy, influence, convincing, negotiating to, when you're working with the CAOs and the chairs and the directors of academic units, they don't actually report to you. They might think they do. They might have a dotted reporting line to you. But, it makes having a skill set of like really listening, trying to understand what is making someone anxious? What is making them worried about their resources, about whatever it is that they're concerned about? How can you help them? That comes to the foreground instead of, well, who has power, right? Or who has authority. Those things, yes, of course, the dean's office has a lot of power and authority, but really in your day-to-day interactions, it's not so much about that, right? It's about how to synthesize the problems and find solutions to them, whether they're people problems or financial problems or, so I think those are important skills. And, how do you end up successful at that? By demonstrating fairness, transparency, good judgment, so that eventually people trust you, that you are trying to do your best to help them. You're trying to be equitable, and that you care about being a citizen of UCLA, not just because of where you happen to be or what your power relationship is with someone. So that's my thinking on my job. And that's exactly why I love it, because that to me makes it really interesting. It's not as straightforward, but it's much more rewarding.
How about you, Kathleen? What sort of skills do you think are needed for this? Thinking hard skills, soft skills.
I mean, one thing that's always helpful, right, is a knowledge of policy, and policy in many different areas, because I find that a lot of the departments write to me when they have a question about policy, right? And if I don't know the answer, then I try and find it or connect my departments to someone who can help them, with policy. So it's interesting because I do find that in the dean's office, when I was in the departments, we did occasionally have a few workarounds, right? Every once in a while, whereas, in the dean's office, you really have to kind of be careful about what you advise departments to do, right? So a knowledge of policy. Then the other thing too is I think, I love what Reem said about, kind of managing through influence and not through authority, right? It's really different. It's really different. When I was in chemistry, there were a lot of people who reported up and all that great stuff, and it was fairly easy to get things done. Now I have to, persuade people to do things and kind of encourage people to do things. And then, of course, working with central offices, persuade them to help and encourage them to help and that sort of thing. But I would just encourage everybody to jump in when you can, right? If somebody says, listen, we don't have anybody right now to handle, I don't know what it is, right? We don't have anybody right now to handle the allocation of star awards. Could you help us by creating a spreadsheet and putting all the names on it? Or we don't have anybody right now to, arrange for Dr. So-and-so's retirement party. Do you think you could pitch in? Or we don't have anybody, right? So, I mean, to really be willing and open and kind of fearless, there's a lot of resources at UCLA. And if you don't know how to do something, you can find someone who can help you learn how. And everybody really learns by doing. So that's would be my advice, is just take the opportunities that come your way, even if they don't seem particularly significant, because you build a portfolio that way of things you can do. That's it. So, and I just want to assure everybody on the call that a PhD in French literature is not required to be an assistant dean. So if anyone's considering taking that route, I can tell you that it may not be the best degree to pursue, but there you go.
So I can echo what Reem said and what Kathleen said. I think that listening is one of the key things to our roles, to understand what it is that's going on, whether it's with a faculty member, whether it's with a staff member, whether it's with a unit. I think that even through my journey that I shared with you with the different positions that I had, I learned about personnel, I learned about payroll. I was a fund manager, so I learned about, the contracts and grants, and as an MSO, I learned about, the university funds. So being open to things that you didn't even see yourself doing, but somebody else can see it in you, definitely is a benefit. not every opportunity is a paid opportunity. So, there's a lot of things that I volunteered for just so that I could, learn different things and gain skills that were going to benefit me in the long run. And those are the things that are really important. I participated in PDP. That was a big thing. I thought I had a really, vast network. After PDP, I had probably triple the network. After that, with just, meeting people that did so many different things in different areas, and being on UCLA's campus for 32 years now, and knowing that there are so many things that I have not seen, and nooks and crannies, and that you didn't even know that exist on the campus. It's like, you have to get out, you have to meet people, you have to, and I know that now it's challenging, post-COVID, because a lot of us, aren't on campus, but events like this, where you can, see someone's name or find out where they work, or, even reaching out to the three of us to ask questions, in the future, about what we think, or, about your career path or things like that. Talking to people, I think is one of the best things. I tell people in my personal life, I'm very quiet. If you saw me at a party, you might not even know that I was there, because I'm just naturally quiet. But in my job and in our jobs, you can't be quiet. You have to talk. We talk all day. Maybe that's why I don't talk outside, because I'm tired of talking by the time, my day is finished. But it's giving a resource to people that they feel comfortable with. And so that is part of I believe, the personality of an assistant dean. And that's at all levels. So, that a staff person feels comfortable coming to talk to you, and that your dean feels comfortable coming to talk to you. I mean, my dean now, she talks to me. She confides in me with, confidential conversations, things that we have to work through. So you have to be able to meet people on different levels within your organization.
That's great. Thanks, Sheila. So let me, as our time sort of comes to conclusion, I want to ask you folks, what do you think the best and worst parts of your jobs are? Sheila, since you laughed first, I'll let you go.
I think the best part of my job is, when you're able to resolve any issues or problems. It's like, we got through this, we were, successful in completing a project, meeting a deadline. You look at it, it doesn't matter how small or how big, the wins are a win. The things that you don't like is, I don't think anybody likes conflict. I don't think that anyone, when there are problems, no matter whether it's a faculty problem or a staff problem, no one, likes to do that, but it's part of our job, and so there are some things that are assigned to you, and I think that goes back to policy. It's not a personal thing, that it's Sheila or Reem or Kathleen. It means that policy states that this is the way things are supposed to be done. And so that's what makes our jobs doable. If we didn't have the policies and the guidelines to follow, that would make our jobs so much more difficult.
Kathleen, what do you think?
So, I mean, one of the things that I agree with, just getting something done is great, right? But as Sheila said, but I think I'm very excited about the mission. I still get very excited about that in a kind of childlike way. I mean, I love the fact that the faculty are so into what they do. And I love how many faculty come to us and tell us, this is the most important thing that happens at UCLA. I'm sure that I am the most important researcher, and the research that I do is and they really believe it, right? And they do amazing research, right? And I find it just, I just find it, their dedication and hard work really inspiring and moving. And then also, the students, right? right? When we get our we have an event every year for first year majors, right? I think we stole that idea from Reem, actually. And to see these students who are starting at UCLA and so excited about the future and really investing in how important they think their education is, I just find that I still find that very moving, right? And very motivating. So, and, one of the worst things, and I just want to say this to everybody on the call, I think about the job is that we don't have the resources that I wish we had, especially in these last few years. I wish we had more resources that we could allocate to departments, because I know how hard everybody's worked. And, with the labor shortage and with all of the COVID issues, it's been a tough few years, for staff. And that's been, really difficult to see that happen and see everybody, working so hard and kind of being on the edge of burnout and trying to keep people from falling over that edge, So I think that's been pretty hard the last couple of years. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well said, both Sheila and Kathleen. I guess what I can just add is, even though I was saying earlier that, assistant deans really don't necessarily have hierarchical power, we are really privileged in the sense that our deans do manage resources for their school. And there are many times when we can step in and help people, right? So that is definitely, I'm sure, for all of us, the most rewarding part of our jobs, that we occasionally can say, well, here's a solution, or here's some funding that will make this possible and improve people's lives. So that is a real privilege. It's so rewarding. And, just as an example, recently with people fleeing Afghanistan, my division could put up some money for that, for people to have visiting scholar appointments here at UCLA. So that's just incredible, in terms of things I don't love, as Kathleen and Sheila both pointed out, being understaffed, seeing the burnout, and feeling a bit powerless to address it. There is some entrenchment we all encounter that we wish weren't there. We, often wish that things could be a little bit different, or, that. And we all sometimes have to deal with slightly narcissistic personalities. I'm thankful that most of the people we deal with are not narcissists, but there are a few, and they drain me, I will say. I find that to be very difficult personally, because it takes up a lot of time and it doesn't feel like time well spent. So I wish there were less of that, if I'm being honest. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks, Reem. So I notice we have about 3 minutes left. Can you guys just throw out some concluding last words and advice for our audience? Sheila, what do you have for our group?
Don't be afraid to try anything new. Just have an open mind, and especially if someone sees a talent in you that you may not see in yourself, then listen to them. It definitely pushed me to where I am now, and sometimes we need that push. And so just don't limit yourself.
Kathleen? I would just say, change is constant, and, roll with it. That's my advice. And that, don't give up. Don't give up on us. UCLA's been around since 1919. I hope we have a few more years, and we will, we're going to roll with it, and we're going to just keep, adapting.
I guess I would just add, being a generalist is really a good thing at UCLA, not just trying to focus on one skill or one knowledge base over another. So I like what Kathleen said about volunteering for different projects, and I would always just add, having good writing skills is key for positions like assistant deans. And I'm still aspiring to having good writing skills. And I constantly have to look up things and go, is it I or me, or where does the apostrophe go? But anyway, that's just a bit of advice in terms of career growth, is that I think writing well is important.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for spending an hour of your precious time with us. I think this has been fun and educational. I'm going to turn this over to Grace for some final concluding administrative words.
Yes,
Grace?
I thank you, Mark. I agree. This has been really eye-opening for me. And I want to give a special thanks to our panelists, Sheila, Reem, Kathleen, and of course to Mark for moderating, and for all of you for attending, and also for really being engaged and asking really great questions. We have our next speaker on Thursday, November 10th on team building and managing in a post-pandemic era. So I hope that you will all join us for that talk. More details will be forthcoming in our newsletter. And thank you all again for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.